Human trafficking is a complex and serious national and transnational crime. Due to increased cyber activity and the dynamic economic, political, and social landscape across Southeast Asia, trafficking can affect anyone, and its negative impacts are felt throughout the region. To effectively address this crime, the member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, agreed on a regional instrument to prevent and respond to human trafficking, including the protection and assistance of victims of trafficking. In 2015, the ASEAN Convention against Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, the ACTIP, was signed by all ASEAN member states. In 2017, ACTIP entered into force. All 10 ASEAN member states are obligated to fully and consistently implement the ACTIP. The ACTIP is a significant milestone and ASEAN's strongest collective statement of the region's common interest and commitment to combating sexual and labor exploitation. But before we unpack the ACTIP, it is important to understand how the Convention defines trafficking in persons. There are three elements of human trafficking. The act: the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons. By means of the threat, or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, or of a position of vulnerability, or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person. For the purpose of exploitation. So what does the ACTIP aim to achieve? The ACTIP outlines three clear objectives. 1. Prevent and combat trafficking in persons, especially against women and children, and to ensure just and effective punishment of traffickers. 2. Protect and assist victims of trafficking in persons with full respect for their human rights. And 3. Promote cooperation among the parties in order to meet these objectives. The ACTIP has 31 articles covering criminalization, prevention, protection, law enforcement, international cooperation. The ACTIP is accompanied by a regional action plan which sets out clear obligations for member states to reflect the ACTIP in national laws, policies, and programs to counter trafficking. Among other actions, all member states are encouraged to develop national strategies or action plans to counter trafficking. ASEAN member states must comply with ACTIP as with other international treaties, either by passing specific laws in their own jurisdictions or by accepting the legislation in its entirety. Through the ACTIP, ASEAN member states are committed to implement policies and practices that are victim-centered, gender-sensitive, child-friendly, and human rights-based. How does the ACTIP relate to counter-trafficking efforts in your country? Here are some examples. Establishing procedures for the proper identification of trafficked victims. Providing protection and assistance to victims of trafficking through a range of services and partnerships. Alleviating the factors that make persons, especially women and children, vulnerable to trafficking. Developing national guidelines to ensure justice agencies adopt victim-sensitive practices. Strengthening legislation to protect victims from punishment and detention. And gathering and publishing regional database on trafficking in persons. The ACTIP highlights the importance of cooperation, including mutual legal assistance, extradition, asset seizure, and police-to-police cooperation. Under the umbrella of enhancing cooperation and coordination, ACTIP also recognizes the important role of non-government organizations and civil society in prevention of trafficking, as well as in protecting victims and helping them to access justice. Who is responsible for the effective implementation of ACTIP? The Senior Officials Meeting on Transnational Crime, SOMTC, is responsible to promote, monitor, review, and report to the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting on Transnational Crime with support of the ASEAN Secretariat. SOMTC has established a working group on trafficking in persons and coordinates efforts across ASEAN sectoral bodies through a regional trafficking in persons work plan, known as the Bohol Trafficking in Persons Work Plan. Government leaders, policymakers, law enforcement, the judiciary, researchers, the media, civil society, and the private sector all have a seat at the table and an important role to play in socializing and implementing the ACTIP. Through implementing the ACTIP, together we can strengthen our collective counter-trafficking efforts to ensure the just punishment of traffickers and the advancement of the rights and protection of victims.